Before we dive into the mighty tale of the Roman Empire, a story of ambition, betrayal, conquest, and destiny, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Every click helps bring history to life. Now, let's journey back over 2,000 years to where it all began. Before the legions marched, before emperors ruled the world, before the marble temples touched the heavens, there was nothing but wild hills and the gentle flow of the river Tiber. It was here, on those rugged banks, that the most powerful civilization in history was born. Rome began as a dream, a spark in the heart of men who refused to be forgotten. Long before the city's walls stood tall, the gods themselves seemed to weave Rome's destiny. In the cradle of myth, two brothers, Romulus and Remus, were born to a Vestal virgin named Rhea Silvia, daughter of a fallen king. Their father, it was said, was Mars, the god of war himself. But fate was cruel. The king, fearing prophecy, ordered the twins to be drowned in the river. Yet the Tiber had mercy. Their basket drifted ashore, and there a she-wolf found them, hungry, crying, innocent. The beast did not harm them. Instead, she nursed them, protected them, and raised them as her own. When the brothers grew, they were found by a shepherd named Faustulus, who taught them the ways of men, to fight, to hunt, to lead. Years passed, and destiny called. The brothers reclaimed their grandfather's throne, but their ambition went further. They wanted a city, their own city. But where should it stand? Remus chose the Aventine Hill, while Romulus favored the Palatine Hill. Their dispute turned to rage, and in a tragic twist of fate, Romulus drew his sword and struck his brother down. "Let whoever crosses my walls suffer the same fate," he declared, with his brother's blood on his hands. Romulus became the first king of Rome. The city was born not from peace, but from power. From the very beginning, Rome's destiny was written in ambition and blood. Romulus gathered men from every corner, fugitives, shepherds, and wanderers, and gave them purpose. They built huts, temples, and walls. They learned to fight as one. But there was a problem: no women. To ensure Rome's future, Romulus devised a bold and ruthless plan. During a grand festival, he invited the neighboring Sabines and seized their women to make them Roman wives. It was a scandalous act, but it worked. The Sabine women eventually pleaded for peace, and the two peoples united. From that union, Rome began to grow. Under Romulus' rule, Rome became a sanctuary, a place for the lost, the brave, and the ambitious. He established laws, created legions, and laid the foundations of what would one day become the greatest empire on earth. The world took little notice of the small settlement by the river, but within its walls burned the fire of destiny. From humble huts and wooden spears, the seeds of greatness had been sown. The rise of Rome had begun. From the blood of brothers and the mercy of a wolf, a legend was born, and that legend would one day rule the world. When the first stones of Rome were laid, it was not an empire. Not yet. It was a kingdom ruled by men who believed they were chosen by the gods themselves. This was the age of kings, a time of ambition, greatness, and tyranny. Romulus ruled with the iron will of a conqueror. He built Rome's first senate, a council of elders to guide his decisions. He divided his people into legions, teaching them discipline and unity, lessons that would echo through centuries. Rome began as a collection of huts, but under Romulus, it became a city of warriors. Yet, the gods are jealous of mortal greatness. After 37 years of rule, Romulus mysteriously vanished during a storm. Some said he was struck by lightning. Others whispered that the Senate tore him apart. But the people believe a divine tale, that Romulus was taken up into the heavens and became Quirinus, a god of war and state. Rome had lost its first king, but the legend had begun. After Romulus, the throne stood empty. The Romans and Sabines, now one people, agreed to share power. They crowned Numa Pompilius, a man of peace, as the second king of Rome. Unlike his predecessor, Numa hated war. He built temples, established the priesthoods, and introduced the Roman calendar. He taught the people that not all glory was won with the sword, that Rome needed the wisdom of the gods as much as the strength of its armies. Under Numa, Rome learned faith. Under Romulus, it had learned power. The two kings represented the balance Rome would forever chase, between war and peace, chaos and order. The kings that followed shaped Rome brick by brick, tradition by tradition. Tullus Hostilius, the third king, was a man of steel. He waged war against Alba Longa, the city of Rome's ancestors. To settle their conflict, 3 Roman brothers, the Horatii, fought 3 Alban brothers, the Curiatii, in a duel to the death. When the dust settled, only 1 Roman stood alive, and Rome claimed victory. Tullus expanded the city's reach, building the first Senate house, the Curia Hostilia, the heart of Roman politics for centuries. Then came Ancus Marcius, a king of balance, who built Rome's first bridge across the Tiber, connecting trade routes and securing the city's future. He founded Ostia, Rome's first seaport, a window to the world. Rome was no longer just a city. It was becoming a power. But greatness often attracts outsiders. From the north came the Etruscans, a wealthy and mysterious people skilled in building and warfare. One of them, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, became Rome's 5th king. Under his rule, Rome transformed. Wooden huts gave way to stone buildings. He began constructing the Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's first sewage systems, and laid the foundations of the Circus Maximus, a massive arena for chariot races that could hold thousands. His successor, Servius Tullius, was a reformer. Born a slave, he rose to power through intelligence and courage. He divided Rome into social classes, organized an army, and built the Servian Wall, a defensive barrier that protected the city for centuries. Rome was becoming powerful, too powerful for one man to rule unchallenged. And then came Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, the 7th and final king of Rome. He seized the throne through violence, ruling with terror and greed. He silenced the Senate, crushed his enemies, and built the great temple of Jupiter on Capitoline Hill to glorify himself. But tyranny has a price. When his son, Sextus Tarquinius, committed a terrible crime against a noble woman named Lucretia, the city erupted in fury. Lucretia's tragic death became the spark of revolution. Her husband, Lucius Junius Brutus, led an uprising that drove the Tarquins from Rome forever. The people had spoken. They would never again bow to kings. In 509 BC, Rome cast off its monarchy and declared itself a republic, a state ruled not by one man, but by laws by the people and for the people. The age of kings had ended, but the dream of Rome was only beginning. From this moment on, Rome would march, not just to conquer lands, but to conquer time itself. 7 kings had ruled. Each left his mark, in stone, in blood, in legend. But Rome was destined for something greater than kingship. It was destined for empire. When tyranny fell, a new dawn rose over Rome. Not the rule of kings, but the rule of men. The people had taken back their destiny. And from the ashes of monarchy, something new was born, the Roman Republic. 509 BC. The city of Rome trembled with rebellion. King Tarquinius Superbus, the tyrant who had ruled with iron and cruelty, had been driven from a throne. His palace burned, his statues shattered, his name cursed. Standing before the people, Lucius Junius Brutus, nephew of the fallen king, raised his sword to the heavens and swore an oath. By this blood, I vow that Rome shall never again be ruled by a king. The crowd roared in agreement. And so, the monarchy ended, and the Roman Republic was born. But a kingdom without a king needs a new way to rule. And so, began one of the boldest experiments in history. Rome's leaders created a system unlike any the world had seen before. Instead of one ruler, power was shared between 2 consuls, elected by the citizens to serve for just 1 year. They could command armies, propose laws, and lead the Senate, but each could also veto the other's decisions. No man would ever hold absolute power again. Beneath them stood the Senate, a body of experienced men, former magistrates, generals, and nobles who debated and guided Rome's policies. The Senate became the beating heart of the Republic, a chamber where ambition and intellect collided daily. Rome was no longer one man's kingdom. It was a living, breathing machine, powered by law, by order, and by the voice of its people. But Rome's people were not equal. The wealthy patricians, noble families of old, held most of the power. The plebeians, the common citizens, fought, farmed, and bled for Rome, yet had no true voice in government. Tension boiled beneath the surface. And soon, the plebeians would rise to demand their rights. In the early years, they refused to fight in wars, threatening to abandon the city unless given representation. The Senate, fearing the loss of its soldiers, agreed to create the office of tribune of the people, powerful officials chosen by the plebeians themselves. These tribunes could veto any law they believed harmed the people, and in doing so, they became the shield of the common man. For the first time in history, power was balanced between rich and poor, privilege and poverty. Still, injustice lingered. Laws were spoken, not written, and the patricians often bent them to their will. So the plebeians demanded transparency. In 451 BC, Rome's leaders carved its laws into 12 bronze tablets and displayed them in the Forum, the heart of the city. These were the 12 tables, Rome's first written constitution. They declared that all citizens were subject to the same laws, that justice was not a gift of the powerful, but a right of the people. It was a foundation of Roman law, a legacy that would outlive the empire itself. With stability came ambition. Rome began to spread beyond its walls, forming alliances, conquering neighboring tribes, and strengthening its legions. Every citizen, whether rich or poor, was expected to serve. The Roman soldier became a symbol of discipline, courage, and loyalty to the Republic. They fought not for a king, but for Rome, a city of laws, not crowns. And with every victory, the Republic grew stronger and prouder. The early Republic had survived wars, revolts, and endless political battles. Its people had forged a government that balanced freedom and authority, wealth and equality. But deep within the Senate's marble halls, ambition still whispered. Power never sleeps, and men, as always, would find ways to take more of it. The Republic was rising, but its future was uncertain. For in Rome, the same fire that built greatness could also bring ruin. The kings were gone, but their shadow remained. Rome was now a republic, proud, free, and powerful. Yet even the strongest republic can fall when power becomes a prize. When the republic was born, Rome was just one city among many, surrounded by rivals, tribes, and kingdoms that doubted its strength. But the Romans were not like others. They did not wait for destiny. They forged it with sword and discipline. This is the story of how a city of farmers became the conqueror of nations, the beginning of Rome's wars of expansion. In the early days of the Republic, Rome was weak, a small power hemmed in by larger foes. To the north stood the proud Etruscans, skilled in warfare and architecture. To the south, the wealthy Greeks of Magna Graecia, who brought art, trade, and rivalry. And all around, the fierce Latin tribes, cousins and enemies, watched Rome with wary eyes. But Rome had something the others did not: unity, determination, and an unbreakable will to survive. When the Etruscans invaded, Rome's legion stood firm. When the Sabines rebelled, they were crushed. And when neighboring cities turned against Rome, the Romans fought with fury unmatched. Every war was brutal. Every victory came with blood. Yet with each battle, Rome learned, adapted, and grew stronger. By 400 BC, Rome was no longer just another city. It was becoming the heart of central Italy. But then came a storm from the north, tall, wild warriors known as the Gauls. In 390 BC, they descended upon Rome like fire. They swept through the Roman army at the Battle of the Allia River, and soon after, the eternal city burned. Smoke filled the skies. Temples were looted, homes destroyed. Only the Capitoline Hill held firm, defended by a handful of brave Romans who refused to surrender. The story goes that one night, as the Gauls crept up the hill in silence, sacred geese of Juno began to squawk and flap their wings, alerting the guards. The Romans awoke, fought back, and held their ground. Eventually, the Gauls agreed to leave, but only after being paid a ransom of gold. Rome was humiliated, but not broken. As the legend tells, one Roman general threw his sword onto the scales and shouted, "Woe to the vanquished! Vi victis!" From that day forward, Rome swore that it would never again bow to any foreign power. The destruction of Rome ignited something deep in its soul, a hunger for strength, for dominance, for vengeance. The city was rebuilt stronger, with stone walls and fortified gates. Its legions trained harder, organized into new formations that would soon terrify the world. Rome began a march, not in defense, but in conquest. One by one, the cities of Latium and Etruria fell under Roman control. But the true test was yet to come. The Samnites, a fierce mountain people who would challenge Rome's might in a series of wars that lasted half a century. The Samnite Wars were brutal, 3 long conflicts that pushed Rome to its limits. The Samnites were cunning warriors, striking from the mountains of central Italy with speed and ferocity. In one infamous moment, the Caudine Forks, an entire Roman army was trapped and forced to march under the yoke, humiliated before their enemies. But Rome never forgot shame. Years later, they returned with vengeance, crushing the Samnites, seizing their lands, and expanding deeper into Italy. Their strategy was simple but genius. They built roads and colonies wherever they conquered, binding Italy together like a web of steel. Every conquered people were offered a choice: join Rome or face destruction. Most chose alliance, and soon all of Italy marched under Roman banners. By the late 3rd century BC, Rome's legions had reached southern Italy, but there they met a new kind of enemy, the Greek city-states of Magna Graecia. When Rome attacked the city of Tarentum, the Greeks called upon a powerful ally, King Pyrrhus of Epirus, a brilliant general from across the sea. Pyrrhus brought war elephants, beasts the Romans had never seen before, and crushed their armies in 2 great battles. But his victories came at a terrible cost. When congratulated after battle, he sighed and said, "One more such victory, and I am undone." Thus was born the phrase, a Pyrrhic victory, a win so costly it feels like defeat. Eventually, Rome's resilience outlasted Pyrrhus's power. He retreated to Greece, and Rome claimed all of southern Italy. By 264 BC, less than 3 centuries after its founding, Rome ruled all of Italy, from the snow-capped Alps to the shores of Sicily. They had faced invaders, rebels, kings, and legends, and overcome them all. But their victories came with a price: pride. The Republic had grown powerful, confident, and hungry for more. Beyond the sea lay new lands, new riches, and a rival power that would soon test Rome's strength like never before: Carthage. The age of Italian conquest had ended. The age of world domination was about to begin. From ashes they rose, from defeat they learned. Rome had conquered Italy, but now the world awaited, and across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, a new enemy stirred, an enemy that would bring Rome its greatest wars yet. By the middle of the 3rd century BC, Rome ruled all of Italy, but across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, another power was rising, rich, powerful, and proud. Its name was Carthage, and between these 2 giants lay the greatest rivalry of the ancient world, a struggle that would decide who ruled the seas, who ruled the lands, and who ruled history itself. Carthage was no ordinary city. Founded by the Phoenicians, it stood on the coast of North Africa, a city of traders, sailors, and wealth beyond imagination. Its ships ruled the Mediterranean. Its merchants traded silver, gold, and spices across the known world. Rome, on the other hand, was a land power. Its legions marched on soil, its pride born from discipline, not trade. 2 worlds, 2 empires, 1 destiny. The spar between them was a small island called Sicily, a jewel in the center of the sea. Both wanted it. Neither would back down. And so, in 264 BC, the First Punic War began. At the start, Rome had no navy. Carthage laughed. They were the masters of the waves. But Rome never stayed weak for long. The Romans captured a Carthaginian ship, studied it, and built a fleet of their own. Over 100 warships in a matter of months. They added a deadly invention called the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into infantry fights, where Rome excelled. Battle after battle, Rome adapted and improved. At Mylae, they won their first naval victory. At Ecnomus, they crushed the Carthaginian fleet, one of the largest sea battles in history. After 23 years of brutal warfare, Carthage was defeated. Rome took Sicily, its first province beyond Italy. But the peace was uneasy. In Carthage, bitterness grew and vengeance began to take shape. In the years that followed, a child was born in Carthage, a boy destined to become Rome's greatest nightmare. His name was Hannibal Barca. Legend says that when he was young, his father, the general Hamilcar Barca, made him swear an oath before the gods. never to be a friend of Rome. Hannibal grew into a brilliant commander, fearless, cunning, and driven by that childhood vow. When Rome meddled in Carthage's new territories in Spain, Hannibal struck back. In 218 BC, he attacked the Roman allied city of Saguntum, igniting the Second Punic War. What Hannibal did next would echo through time. He gathered an army of 50,000 soldiers, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants, and began a march no one believed possible, across the towering Alps into Italy itself. Through snow, avalanches, and ambushes, Hannibal led his men for weeks. Many died, frozen or crushed, but survivors emerged, fierce and ready for battle. The Romans were stunned. An enemy had crossed the mountains and stood upon their homeland. The invasion had begun. Hannibal unleashed a storm of victories. At Trebia, his cavalry destroyed the Roman legions. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed and annihilated 15,000 Roman soldiers, one of the largest ambushes in history. Then came the ultimate disaster, the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal's smaller army surrounded and crushed a Roman force twice its size. Over 50,000 Romans were slain in a single day. The fields ran red. Rome's greatest generals fell. The Republic was in panic. Allies began to waver. Many thought Rome was finished, but Rome did not break. In their darkest hour, Rome found strength. They refused to surrender, refused to negotiate. They raised new armies, trained new commanders, and among them was one who would change the war, Publius Cornelius Scipio. While Hannibal ravaged Italy, Scipio struck at Carthage's heart, attacking their holdings in Spain and Africa. His victories forced Hannibal to return home. In 202 BC, the two legends finally met at the Battle of Zama outside Carthage. It was a clash of titans. Hannibal's elephants charged, but Scipio's disciplined legions held firm. When the dust settled, Carthage was defeated, and Hannibal fled into exile. Rome emerged victorious, and Scipio was hailed as Scipio Africanus. For 50 years, Carthage lived under Roman control, paying tribute and watching its pride fade. But Rome's hatred burned on. In 149 BC, politicians like Cato the Elder demanded total destruction. He ended every speech with the same words: Carthago delenda Carthage must be destroyed. Rome invaded once again. For 3 years, Carthage resisted bravely. But in 146 BC, Roman legions breached the city walls. Street by street, house by house, they burned it to the ground. The survivors were enslaved. The soil was said to have been salted so that nothing would ever grow again. Carthage was no more. Rome now ruled the Western world. The Punic Wars had transformed Rome. It was no longer just a republic. It was an empire in all but name. From Spain to Greece, from North Africa to the islands of sea, Rome's banner flew high. Its navy ruled the waters. Its legions ruled the earth. But with great power came greater temptation, greed, ambition, and corruption. And within Rome's marble walls, a new war was brewing, a war not against enemies abroad, but among Romans themselves. For over a century, Rome and Carthage fought for the soul of the world. Only one survived. But in victory, Rome had tasted the poison of power, and it would never be the same again. Rome had conquered the world. But soon, the conquerors would turn on themselves. From the ashes of Carthage rose an empire of gold, pride, and ambition, but also of greed, corruption, and blood. This is the story of Rome at its peak, and the first signs of its fall. After the Punic Wars, Rome's power was unmatched. Its armies marched east into Greece, Asia, and Africa. Its legions crushed kings, seized treasures, and returned with ships filled with gold and slaves. Victorious generals paraded through the streets in grand triumphs, riding in golden chariots, their faces painted red like the god Jupiter. Crowds cheered as spoils of war and chained captives passed by. Rome had become the greatest superpower the world had ever known. But behind the cheering crowds, shadows were growing. With victory came unimaginable wealth, and with wealth came greed. Senators grew rich from conquests, buying vast estates and forcing small farmers off their lands. The countryside emptied as poor citizens flooded into Rome, desperate for work and food. Once a nation of citizen soldiers and farmers, Rome was now ruled by the wealthy elite. The Republic's ideals, honor, service, and duty, began to crumble under the weight of gold. The poor starved while nobles dined in marble halls. And the Senate, once the heart of the Republic, became a nest of corruption and ambition. In this age of injustice, two brothers rose to challenge the greed of Rome's elite, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They were young, brave, and from a noble family, but their hearts burned for the people. Tiberius Gracchus proposed a bold reform, to take the vast lands hoarded by the rich and return them to the poor. The Senate was outraged. How dare a young tribune defy their power? Tiberius was murdered on the steps of the Senate, beaten to death by the very men sworn to uphold the Republic. Years later, his brother Gaius tried to continue his mission. He too was hunted down and killed. Their blood stained the streets of Rome, and their deaths marked the beginning of political violence in the Republic. The age of assassinations had begun. As poverty spread, Rome found a cruel solution: distraction. The government provided free grain to the hungry and built massive arenas to entertain the restless crowds. Gladiators fought to death in the Colosseum's forerunners. Chariots thundered through the Circus Maximus. The people were fed and entertained, but no longer free. Bread in circuses, the politicians said, and they will never rebel. Rome had traded virtue for vanity and freedom for spectacle. Meanwhile, a dangerous change was taking place in the legions. Generals began to promise land, wealth, and glory to their soldiers, rewards the state could no longer guarantee. The men stopped fighting for the Republic and started fighting for their commanders. Loyalty shifted from Rome itself to ambitious warlords, men like Marius and Sulla, who would soon use their armies not against foreign enemies, but against each other. The Republic was beginning to rot from the inside. In the streets of Rome, riots broke out. Political factions clashed with swords. Corruption spread through every corner of government. And in the heart of it all, the Senate remained blind, too busy enriching themselves to see that Rome was tearing itself apart. The ideals that once united Rome, discipline, honor, and unity, were fading fast. The Republic that had conquered the world could not conquer itself. But from this chaos, new men would rise, soldiers and statesmen who believed they could restore order, even if it meant ruling with absolute power. One of them would be named Julius Caesar, a man whose ambition would change Rome forever. As the old Republic decayed, the stage was being set for a new kind of leader and a new kind of Rome. The Republic had triumphed over kings, over empires, and over enemies. But its greatest enemy was itself. From the ashes of greed and glory, destiny was preparing a man who would rise above them all and forge Rome into an empire that would shake the world. From the chaos of the crumbling Republic, a new power began to rise. A man whose name would echo through history for over 2,000 years. His ambition was limitless, his courage unmatched, and his destiny inevitable. This is the rise of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born in 100 BC into an ancient but fading patrician family, the Julii. Though noble by blood, his family had little money or influence left. But Caesar had something greater, an unshakable belief that he was destined for greatness. Even as a boy, he walked the streets of Rome with confidence, studying the orators, the senators, and the generals who ruled his world. He vowed that one day he would stand among them and surpass them all. But Rome was in chaos. Two powerful men, Marius and Sulla, were locked in civil war, each claiming to save the Republic. When Sulla seized power and became dictator, he began purging his enemies, and Caesar's family was on his list. Ordered to divorce his wife, Cornelia, Caesar refused. He was stripped of his titles and hunted through the streets. Captured by soldiers, he faced death, but somehow he escaped. It was the first test of his life, and he passed it not with a sword, but with defiance. Even Sulla, upon hearing of Caesar's escape, warned, "There are many Mariuses in Caesar. Beware that one day he may destroy the Republic." Soon after, Caesar was captured by pirates while sailing across the Aegean Sea. They demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver, but Caesar laughed. "You have no idea who you've captured," he told them. "I will pay you 50 talents, and then I will return to crucify you." For weeks, he lived among them as a guest, even joining their games and poetry readings. But when his ransom was paid and he was released, Caesar raised a small fleet, hunted them down, and kept his promise. The pirates were crucified, a brutal reminder that Caesar was a man of his word. Back in Rome, Caesar began to climb the political ladder. The cursus honorum, through charm, oratory, and cunning alliances. He was handsome, eloquent, and generous, traits that made him beloved by the common people. He used lavish games and public festivals to win their favor, spending money he did not have, but gaining something far more valuable, loyalty. He rose from military tribune to quaestor, then aedile, dazzling the crowds with his generosity. Every step was calculated. Every friendship, every alliance, a piece of a larger plan. Caesar wasn't just climbing toward power, he was building it. In 58 BC, Caesar was appointed governor of Gaul, modern-day France. For most, it was a remote province. For Caesar, it was a battlefield of destiny. For nearly a decade, he led his legions across rivers, mountains, and forests, conquering tribes, crushing rebellions, and expanding Rome's borders farther than ever before. He fought the Helvetii, the Belgae, and the mighty Gauls under the warrior king Vercingetorix. At the Battle of Alesia, Caesar surrounded Vercingetorix's forces with massive fortifications, walls facing inward and outward, trapping both the enemy and their reinforcements. When it was over, Gaul was conquered. He returned not just as a general, but as a legend. His soldiers adored him, the people worshipped him, and the Senate feared him. Before his conquests, Caesar had formed a secret alliance with two powerful men, Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, and Crassus, the richest man in the Republic. Together, they ruled as the first triumvirate, an unofficial three-man dictatorship. They divided power among themselves, controlling Rome from behind the scenes. But alliances built on ambition never last. Crassus died in battle, and Pompey grew jealous of Caesar's fame. Soon, the Senate, led by Pompey, ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a civilian. But Caesar had no intention of giving up his power. In the winter of 49 BC, Caesar stood before the Rubicon River, the boundary that no general was allowed to cross with an army. Crossing it meant war against Rome itself. As his men waited, Caesar stared into the waters and whispered the immortal words, "Alia iacta isi," the die is cast. He crossed the river, and with that single act, the Roman Civil War began. Pompey and the Senate fled. The fate of the Republic now rested on the edge of Caesar's sword. From a hunted boy to the conqueror of Gaul, from exile to the master of legions, Julius Caesar had risen higher than anyone before him. But his rise was not yet complete, and soon Rome itself would bow before his power. Rome stood divided, brother against brother, general against general, and at the heart of it all, one man who refused to bow. Julius Caesar had crossed the Rubicon, and with that single act, he set the world's greatest republic on fire. As Caesar's legions marched south, panic swept through Rome. Senators fled the city. Pompey the Great, once Caesar's ally, now his rival, gathered his loyal forces and retreated to Greece. Caesar entered Rome without bloodshed. He stood before the empty Senate chamber, the torches flickering on the marble walls. The Republic had fallen silent, waiting to see who would rule it next. But Caesar wasn't just after power. He wanted legitimacy. He wanted to be seen not as a tyrant, but as a savior. Caesar moved fast. He seized the state treasury, declared himself dictator, and restored order to the city. Then, leaving only a small garrison behind, he marched across Italy, through Spain, and into Greece, hunting Pompey. Pompey had the Senate, the fleets, and the loyalty of the eastern provinces. Caesar had speed, strategy, and the love of his soldiers. The world held its breath as two of Rome's greatest generals prepared to clash. In 48 BC, in the plains of Pharsalus, the two armies met. Pompey's legions outnumbered Caesar's nearly 2-1. He planned to surround Caesar's forces and crush them, but Caesar's genius was unmatched. He held back a small reserve of men, hidden, silent, waiting. When Pompey's cavalry charged, Caesar's reserve struck like lightning, breaking their flank and turning the tide. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Pompey's army collapsed under the weight of Caesar's fury. When the dust cleared, The Senate's great hope was gone. Pompey fled the field, and Caesar was victorious. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge under the young Pharaoh Ptolemy XIII. But when he arrived, he was betrayed. On the shores of Alexandria, Pompey was stabbed to death, his head cut off as a gift for Caesar. When Caesar arrived days later and saw the severed head of his former friend, he turned away in sorrow. Even in victory, he wept. For Caesar understood Rome had lost more than a general. It had lost its soul. In Egypt, Caesar met someone who would change his life forever. Cleopatra, the exiled queen, clever, beautiful, and ambitious. Cleopatra sought Caesar's help to reclaim her throne. Together, they formed an alliance and soon a romance. When Caesar's soldiers fought Ptolemy's forces in the streets of Alexandria, Cleopatra stood by his side. When the smoke cleared, she was queen once more and bore Caesar's son Caesarion heir to two worlds. But Rome was calling. The Republic was shattered, and Caesar's enemies still waited in the shadows. When Caesar returned to Rome, he was unstoppable. He was hailed as dictator for life, a title no Roman had dared to claim before. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar we still use today. He granted citizenship to thousands, relieved debts, and rebuilt the city's temples and roads. For the people, he was a hero, a man of mercy and progress. But to the Senate, he was becoming a king, and Rome had killed kings before. Whispers filled the marble halls of the Senate. Some senators admired him, others feared him, and a few plotted his death. Among them was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar trusted like a son. They called themselves the Liberators, claiming to defend the Republic. But in truth, they were driven by envy and fear of his power. While Caesar dreamed of new conquests, of invading Parthia and uniting the world, his enemies were dreaming of daggers. The Republic was gone, the world was his, and the name of Caesar echoed in every corner of Rome. But even the mightiest of men cannot escape fate. And soon, the Ides of March would arrive, bringing with it the knife that would change history forever. Julius Caesar had conquered the world, but in the city he loved most, among the men he called friends, his greatest enemy was waiting, not on the battlefield, but in the shadows. It was the year 44 BC. Rome stood at the height of its glory, rich, powerful, and feared by all. Caesar had returned from victory in Spain, where he crushed the last of Pompey's followers. He was now the dictator for life, worshipped by the people and loved by his army. Everywhere he went, crowds shouted his name. Ave Caesar! Hail Caesar! He had achieved everything, power, fame, and the loyalty of millions. But with every triumph came envy, and envy is the most dangerous weapon in Rome. Caesar believed he could rebuild a republic, not through war, but through wisdom. He created jobs for the poor, expanded citizenship, and gave land to veterans. He even invited his old enemies back to serve in government, mercy no Roman ruler had ever shown before. But his mercy made him appear too powerful, too forgiving, and too much like a king. He wore a purple robe, the color of royalty. His image was placed on coins, and when the people offered him a crown, he refused it, but not firmly enough to calm the Senate's fear. In the eyes of many, the Republic was already dead, and Caesar was the man who had killed it. In secret meetings behind closed doors, a group of senators plotted. They called themselves the Liberators, claiming to act in the name of freedom, but their hearts were filled with jealousy and fear. Leading them was Gaius Cassius Longinus, a man bitter from losing power, and Marcus Junius Brutus, Caesar's trusted ally, the man he had spared, promoted, and loved like a son. Brutus was torn between loyalty and duty, between love and the lure of saving Rome. Cassius whispered in his ear, "If Caesar lives, there will be no Rome, only Caesar." And so Brutus joined the plot. As the Ides of March approached, March 15th, strange omens filled the air. A soothsayer warned Caesar, "Beware the Ides of March." His wife, Calpurnia, dreamed of blood flowing from a statue and begged him not to go to the Senate that day. Even his friend Mark Antony urged caution. But Caesar, proud and fearless, laughed off the warnings. "What is to be will be," he said. He had survived battles, assassins, and pirates. He could not imagine betrayal from within his own walls. Morning broke on March 15th, 44 BC. The air was heavy, the sky pale. Caesar walked the streets toward the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting, ironically, in the hall built by the man he had once defeated. As he entered, the senators rose to greet him with smiles that hid their daggers. Then, in a moment that would forever change history, the trap was sprung. As Caesar took his seat, one senator approached with a petition. Another pulled at his robe. Then suddenly, a dagger flashed. And another. 23 blades struck him from every side. He fought back at first, stunned and defiant. Then he saw Brutus. Eyes wide with disbelief, he uttered the words that echo through time. "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" And when even his beloved friend turned against him, Caesar pulled his toga over his face and fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, the very man whose death had begun his rise. The conqueror of the world lay dead in a pool of blood, and the republic he had tried to save died with him. When the deed was done, the assassins rushed into the streets shouting, "Liberty! Freedom! The republic is restored." But the people did not cheer. They wept. They had loved Caesar, not for his power, but for his mercy. As his body lay on the Senate floor, Rome fell into chaos. Riots erupted. The conspirators fled for their lives. And as Caesar's funeral pyre burned, the crowd chanted his name, swearing vengeance on those who had slain their hero. They thought by killing Caesar they could save the republic, but they had only unleashed its end. For from his ashes would rise a new Rome, and a new ruler, one who would avenge his death and become the first emperor of them all. The Ides of March had come and gone. Julius Caesar, the man who ruled the world, was dead, but his death did not save the republic, it destroyed it. For in the power vacuum that followed, new stars began to rise, and one of them would eclipse them all. Rome was in chaos. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, and their allies, had fled the city, believing the people would welcome them as liberators. But the people did not celebrate. They mourned. They wept for Caesar, their hero, their reformer, their champion. To them, the Senate had not killed a tyrant. They had murdered a savior. And amidst confusion, one young man quietly entered the city, Caesar's adopted son and heir, Gaius Octavius. Octavian was just 18 years old. He had little military experience, no Senate seat, and few allies. But he had something far more powerful: Caesar's name and his fortune. In Caesar's will, he was declared Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, the rightful heir to his legacy. The people saw in him the return of their beloved leader, the spark of the old Caesar's spirit reborn in youthful form. While the Senate underestimated him, Octavian began to quietly build loyalty to Caesar's soldiers, to the plebeians, and to those who still longed for order in the chaos. At the same time, Mark Antony, Caesar's closest ally and general, believed he should inherit Rome's power. He was bold, passionate, and dangerous, a man who commanded armies and hearts alike. He delivered a fiery speech at Caesar's funeral, his words igniting the crowd into rage. As Antony raised Caesar's blood-stained toga before the people, he cried, "This was the mantle of Caesar. Look, here is where the dagger struck him." The mob erupted. They hunted the conspirators, burning their homes, driving them from Rome. Antony became the hero of the moment, but Octavian watched in silence and planned. Within months, the city was divided between Antony's loyalists and Octavian's growing followers. The Senate, fearful of Antony's ambitions, turned to Octavian for help. The boy who had once been ignored was now given command of troops, and for the first time he marched on Rome. Facing defeat, Antony fled north to join forces with Caesar's old legions. A civil war loomed again. Caesar's death had not brought peace, but vengeance. Then, in a stunning twist of fate, the two rivals, Antony and Octavian, forged a fragile alliance. In 43 BC, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus, another of Caesar's generals, formed the Second Triumvirate. A three-man dictatorship ruled and avenged Caesar's death. Their first act was brutal. They unleashed a proscription, a list of enemies to be hunted and killed. Senators, nobles, and even friends were executed. Among them was Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, whose tongue Antony ordered nailed to the rostrum. Rome bled once again, but the triumvirate had one goal: to destroy the assassins of Caesar. 2 years later, their armies clashed with those of Brutus and Cassius in the dusty plains of Philippi, in Greece. It was a brutal and decisive battle. Legions against legions, Romans killing Romans. Antony's forces crushed Cassius on one flank, while Octavian's army struggled. Cassius, thinking all was lost, took his own life. When Brutus later learned of his death, he too fell on his sword. And in the cause of the Republic, the assassins were dead. Caesar's death was avenged, but Rome was no closer to peace. With their enemies gone, the alliance began to crumble. Lepidus was pushed aside. Only Antony and Octavian remained, and both hungered for total power. Antony turned to Egypt and to Queen Cleopatra. Together, they formed a union of love and ambition, ruling from Alexandria as though they were gods. Antony began to style himself as a new Dionysus, draped in Eastern luxury, while Octavian remained in Rome, presenting himself as the humble guardian of Roman virtue. Rome watched and whispered. To them, Antony had become corrupted by the East, and Octavian would be their savior once again. The stage was set for one final war, not between Caesar's enemies, but between his heirs, Mark Antony, the warrior of passion and power, and Octavian, the master of patience and control. Only one would rule the greatest empire on earth. The world had split in two, Rome itself divided between two giants, Mark Antony, the soldier of fire and love, and Octavian, the cold and cunning heir of Caesar. Their clash would decide the future of Rome, and the destiny of an empire that would outlive them both. After the victory at Philippi, Mark Antony ruled the eastern provinces of Rome. In Egypt, he met Queen Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of the Nile. She was radiant, intelligent, and intoxicating, a woman of vision and power. Antony fell under her spell, not just as a lover, but as an equal. Together, they dreamed of a new empire, not Roman, not Egyptian, but something greater, a world ruled by love, beauty, and the power of the East. They lived in splendor, golden halls, silk curtains, and feasts that lasted for days. They called themselves gods, Dionysus and Isis reborn. But in Rome, their love was seen as treason. Back in Rome, Octavian watched with cold precision. He saw Antony's behavior not as romance, but as weakness, and he knew how to use it. He began a campaign of propaganda, spreading messages that Antony had betrayed Rome, that he had given Roman lands to Cleopatra, and that he planned to move the capital to Alexandria. Then, he revealed Antony's will, a secret document supposedly leaving his power and fortune to Cleopatra's children. The Senate erupted in outrage. To them, Antony was no longer a Roman hero. He was a traitor. In 31 BC, the Senate declared war, not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. It was a masterstroke of Octavian's political genius. By making Cleopatra the enemy, he turned the people of Rome against Antony, without dividing the nation. Antony answered by marching his armies and assembling a massive fleet. Cleopatra brought her Egyptian navy, over 200 ships, glittering with gold and purple sails. Opposing them was Octavian's commander, Marcus Agrippa, a brilliant strategist and loyal friend. The stage was set for the greatest naval battle the ancient world had ever seen, the Battle of Actium. The sun rose over the Ionian Sea. The waters shimmered like glass, hiding the blood that would soon stain them. On one side, Antony and Cleopatra, their fleets anchored near the coast of Greece. On the other, Agrippa, commanding Octavian's disciplined legions and warships. Antony had passion, courage, and love. Octavian had patience, precision, and strategy. Cleopatra stood on the deck of her royal ship, its stern shaped like the wings of a falcon, watching the horizon with fire in her eyes. She believed love could conquer empires. But Rome was built on something far colder, ambition. At noon, the battle began. War horns echoed across the waves. The air filled with the clash of oars, the crash of ramming ships, the screams of men and the roar of fire. Antony's ships were larger, towering behemoths armed with catapults and hundreds of soldiers, but they were slow and heavy. Agrippa's ships were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable, slicing through the sea like blades. For hours, the battle raged in chaos. Antony fought fiercely, his armor gleaming under the sun. But Agrippa's strategy began to close the trap. Then Cleopatra made her move. In the midst of the chaos, Cleopatra's royal fleet suddenly broke formation. Her ships turned and sailed away from the battle, fleeing south toward Egypt. Some say she panicked. Others believe it was part of an agreed plan if the battle went badly. But when Antony saw her sails retreating, his heart overruled his mind. He abandoned the fight and followed her. Behind them, his fleet collapsed. Thousands of Roman soldiers were left leaderless and surrounded. The sea turned red with their blood. By sunset, Agrippa had won. Octavian was victorious. And the dream of Antony and Cleopatra died on the waves. Antony and Cleopatra fled back to Egypt, their empire crumbling around them. Octavian pursued, his victory complete. In Rome, he was hailed as a savior, the man who had restored honor, defeated treachery, and avenged Caesar's dream. But in Alexandria, the lovers waited for the inevitable. Their power was gone, their armies scattered. They were rulers without a kingdom, gods without worshippers. Antony looked out upon the Nile and whispered, "I have lost the world for love." The Battle of Actium marked the end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of the empire. Mark Antony, the last of Caesar's great generals, was defeated not by might, but by fate. And Octavian, the boy who once seemed powerless, was now the master of the world. Power, glory, love, they had possessed it all and lost it all. Mark Antony, Rome's fiercest general, and Cleopatra, Egypt's last queen. Once they ruled the East like gods. Now, they waited in the shadows of ruin, as Octavian's legions closed in to finish what destiny had begun. Studio microphone narrator, slow, mournful tone. In the heat of an Egyptian summer, Alexandria stood silent. Once a city of gold and light, it now trembled with fear. The banners of Rome approached from the desert, carried by Octavian's victorious army. Inside the royal palace, Cleopatra paced before her throne, her crown tilted, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. Antony sat beside her, his armor tarnished, his spirit broken. He had fought wars across the world, from Gaul to Parthia. But this battle he could not win. The dream they built of a new empire of love was crumbling. Still, Cleopatra whispered, "If we are to fall, we will fall as rulers, not prisoners." Octavian's forces surrounded the city. The harbor burned. The people panicked. Antony's few remaining soldiers fought bravely, but defeat was certain. When Antony heard false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life, he cried out in agony, "Then I have no reason to live." He turned his sword upon himself, the same blade that had fought in Caesar's wars, and plunged it into his chest. But death did not come swiftly. As he lay bleeding, gasping for air, a servant rushed in, crying, "My lord, the queen still lives." Antony's eyes widened. "Still lives? Then take me to her." Cleopatra had locked herself in her mausoleum, a grand chamber she had built long ago, filled with gold, jewels, and treasures meant for eternity. When Antony was carried to her on trembling arms, she ordered the doors open just enough to pull him inside. There, surrounded by the relics of her kingdom, they saw each other one last time. Antony, pale and dying, whispered, "Do not mourn me. My queen, all that I gave to you." Cleopatra wept, holding him in her arms. "You were the sun of my life, Mark Antony. Without you, I am nothing but a shadow." With his final breath, he murmured, "Rome will never know a love like ours." And then he was gone. Days later, Octavian entered Alexandria. He was just 32 years old, calm, dignified, unshaken. He ordered that Cleopatra be captured alive, for he intended to parade her through the streets of Rome as a trophy of conquest. But Cleopatra, proud and defiant to the end, had other plans. I will not be chained to his triumph, she said. She dressed in her royal robes, gold crown, white linen, emerald jewelry, and waited in her mausoleum. She would die as a queen, not as a prisoner. Cleopatra sat upon her throne, calm as the Nile at dawn. Her 2 servants, Charmian and Iras, stood beside her, trembling. Before them lay a simple basket, filled with figs, but hidden among them was a deadly ispi, its fangs carrying the poison of eternity. Cleopatra lifted the serpent gently, its scales glistening like polished bronze. She looked at the heavens and whispered, "Immortal gods, receive me and my lover Mark Antony as equals." Then she pressed the snake to her breast. A moment's pain and peace, as the poison coursed through her veins. She smiled. When Octavian's guards broke through the door, they found her lifeless on her throne. The serpent coiled at her feet, the last queen of Egypt gone to join her king. Mark Antony and Cleopatra were gone, their empire consumed by Rome, their story etched into legend. Octavian stood over her body in silence. He ordered that she be buried beside Antony, for even in death, their love could not be separated. Then he turned his eyes toward the horizon, toward Rome. For now, there were no rivals left. The Republic was dead, and from its ashes, a new world was about to rise. The death of Antony and Cleopatra marked the final breath of the old world, a world of kings, pharaohs, and dreamers. In their place rose the might of Rome, united under one man, Octavian, who would soon become Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The Republic was dead. The chaos of civil war was over, and from the ashes of the old world, a new power rose, stronger, wiser, and more magnificent than ever before. This was not the Rome of senators and speeches. It was the Rome of emperors, and at its head stood one man, Octavian, soon to be called Augustus Caesar. After the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian returned to Rome in triumph. The city erupted in celebration. Banners of gold lined the streets, trumpets blared, and the people cheered. Hail, Caesar's heir! Hail the savior of Rome! But beneath the joy was exhaustion. Rome had endured nearly a century of blood, from Caesar's rise to the fall of Antony. The Senate was weak, the treasury drained, and the people longed for stability. Octavian understood this better than anyone. He would not call himself king. He would call himself restorer, the man who brought order back to Rome. In 27 BC, Octavian addressed the Senate. He stood humbly before them and announced, "I return to you the powers you once entrusted to me. Let the Republic be restored." It was the masterstroke of political theater. The senators, fearing the return of chaos, refused to accept his resignation. Instead, they granted him even more authority, the command of the armies, control of the provinces, and the title that would echo through history, Augustus, meaning the Exalted One. That day, the Republic ended, and the Roman Empire was born. Under Augustus, Rome was transformed. He rebuilt temples, repaired roads, and filled the city with marble. Where chaos had reigned, he built peace, a peace that would last for centuries. He established the Praetorian Guard, an elite force sworn to protect the emperor. He reformed the laws, encouraged marriage and morality, and restored faith in the Roman gods. The Senate still existed, but now it bowed to one man. Augustus was careful to hide his absolute power behind the illusion of democracy. The people called him princeps, the first citizen, but all knew he was emperor in everything but name. With Augustus's rule came what historians would later call the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For over 200 years, Rome would know stability and prosperity unknown to any civilization before it. Trade flourished. Roads connected lands from Spain to Syria, from Britain to Egypt. Roman law brought order. Roman culture spread to every corner of the empire. Citizens once divided by civil war now shared a single dream, the dream of Rome eternal. Yet behind the golden image of Augustus was a man who carried the weight of every life lost to make this peace possible. He was not a conqueror like Caesar, nor a lover like Antony. He was something far more dangerous, a ruler who understood patience, deception, and control. He ruled not by the sword alone, but by the mind. Every victory was calculated, every law deliberate, every word carefully chosen. He became the architect of an empire that would endure for 1,000 years. In time, Augustus became more than a ruler. He became a symbol. The Senate dedicated temples to his name. His image adorned coins, statues, and banners across the known world. When he walked the streets, crowds knelt. When he spoke, silence fell. And when he ruled, the world obeyed. The boy who once entered Rome an orphan of war had become the father of an empire. Under Augustus, the Roman Empire was reborn, a civilization that would shape the destiny of mankind. Its language, its laws, its architecture, its vision of order and power would echo for millennia. This was not the end of the Roman story. It was the beginning of an empire that would stand for eternity. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to join us on this incredible journey through time. Now, let's return to ancient Rome, where marble gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, and the empire entered its most radiant era, the golden age of Augustus. For the first time in generations, Rome knew peace. The armies rested, the borders were secure, and across the vast expanse of the empire, from the sands of Egypt to the forests of Gaul, the eagle standards of Rome stood unchallenged. This was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And under Augustus, it became more than a slogan. It became a reality. Farmers tilled the land without fear. Merchants filled the roads and seas with goods from across the world. Spices from India, silk from China, gold from Africa. Rome was no longer just a city. It was the beating heart of the known world. Augustus once said, "I found Rome a city of brick, and I left it a city of marble." And he meant every word. Under his reign, the city was reborn, with grand temples, glittering statues, and magnificent public works. The Forum of Augustus rose beside that of Caesar, crowned by the temple of Mars Ultor, the god of war avenger, built to honor his victory over Caesar's murderers. Theaters, aqueducts, and roads transformed Rome into a marvel of architecture and engineering. Marble gleamed on every corner. At night, torches illuminated the streets where once darkness reigned. Rome had become the jewel of the ancient world. While soldiers guarded Rome's borders, poets and thinkers shaped its soul. Augustus surrounded himself with artists, philosophers, and writers who immortalized his rule. It was during this time that Virgil wrote the Aeneid, the epic tale of Rome's divine destiny, a story of courage, sacrifice, and empire, crafted to glorify Augustus and the nation he built. Horace sang of virtue, loyalty, and moderation. Ovid wrote of love and passion, until his verses displeased the emperor, and he was exiled to the edge of the world. In this golden age, Rome did not only conquer with its legions, but with its words, its art, and its ideas. But Augustus was more than a builder and a patron. He was a reformer. He reorganized the army, ensuring soldiers served Rome, not individual generals. He created a standing navy to protect trade routes. He reformed the tax system, brought order to the provinces, and rewarded loyalty with citizenship, turning Rome from a city-state into a true empire of nations. He even passed moral laws, encouraging marriage, punishing adultery, and promoting the virtues of discipline and family. Through every reform, Augustus sought one thing: to preserve the empire he built and ensure it would last forever. Yet even in peace, Augustus faced a challenge he could not control: time. He grew older and questions of succession loomed. His trusted friend and General Agrippa, who had helped him win the empire, died suddenly. Augustus's nephew Marcellus, once his favorite, followed soon after. Then his grandsons, Gaius and Lucius, both destined for greatness, died before they could wear the laurel crown. One by one, fate took them all, and in their place rose Tiberius, the dark and distant stepson of Augustus, a man capable but cold. The empire that had flourished under light would one day fall into shadow. In the final years of his reign, Augustus looked upon his empire, from the towers of Rome to the farthest provinces, and saw what no man had seen before: a world united under one banner. A civilization defined by order, strength, and beauty. When he died in 14 AD, the people wept as if a god had left the earth. The Senate declared him divine, and temples rose in his honor. His name became legend, his empire eternal, and those centuries would pass. The world would forever remember the age of Augustus as the moment when Rome reached perfection. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to stay with us as we continue the epic story of Rome's rise and the cracks that would one day bring it down. Now, we return to a Rome at the height of its power, but no longer at peace within itself. When Augustus died in 14 AD, the people of Rome mourned as though a god had departed. Temples filled with incense, priests offered sacrifices, and senators praised his reign. But one man watched in silence, Tiberius, his successor. Reluctant, withdrawn, and often misunderstood, Tiberius had never sought glory. He was a soldier, a strategist, and a man hardened by exile and betrayal. Now he wore the purple, and the fate of the empire rested on his shoulders. Yet, unlike Augustus, Tiberius ruled not with inspiration, but with fear. Tiberius was no orator. He rarely appeared in public, and when he did, his face revealed little emotion. The Senate feared him. The people barely knew him. His rule began with moderation, careful, restrained, almost cautious. But slowly, a chill crept through Rome. Whispers spread that the emperor trusted no one, not his generals, not his advisors, not even his own family. He surrounded himself with spies, and every word spoken in the city could be reported to the palace. The age of marble began to echo with the sound of paranoia. Among those closest to Tiberius was Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the ambitious commander of the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldier sworn to protect the emperor. Sejanus was cunning, persuasive, and ruthless. He whispered into the emperor's ear, turning suspicion into power. Under his influence, the Praetorians became more than guards. They became the empire's most feared weapon. Political rivals disappeared. Accusations of treason filled the courts. The Senate trembled as names were read aloud, each one marked for death. Rome had entered an age of terror, where a word could cost a man his life. Weary of politics and disgusted by Rome's decadence, Tiberius abandoned the city altogether. He retreated to the island of Capri, a paradise surrounded by the blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. There, far from the Senate and the people, he ruled in isolation, issuing commands through letters sealed with his signet. To the public, he became a ghost emperor, a man who ruled from shadows, unseen but ever present. Rumors spread of his cruelty, his dark pleasures, and his madness. Whether true or not, the stories grew, and with each passing year, his image became darker, more monstrous, more feared. While Tiberius isolated himself, Sejanus seized his chance. He plotted to seize the throne. He courted senators, silenced rivals, and even sought to marry into the imperial family. For a time it seemed he might succeed, until fate once again turned. A secret message reached Tiberius. The emperor, silent for years, finally acted. Sejanus was arrested in the Senate itself, dragged from his chair of power, and executed the same day. The people cheered his death, but Rome's terror did not end. It deepened. After Sejanus's fall, Tiberius trusted no one. Trials for treason multiplied. Families turned on each other to survive. Informers grew rich. The prisons overflowed with the bodies of Rome's elite. And in the dark chambers of Capri, Tiberius signed death warrants in silence, his mind consumed by suspicion. The emperor who had once promised stability, now ruled by fear and blood. In 37 AD, after years of isolation and cruelty, Tiberius died at the age of 78. When word of his death reached Rome, the people celebrated openly, as if freed from a nightmare. His body was burned with little ceremony, and few mourned the man who had ruled in shadows. Yet his reign revealed a truth that would haunt the empire forever, that Rome's greatest danger did not come from its enemies, but from within. The empire Augustus built with marble and vision had begun to crack under suspicion and tyranny. The stage was set for a new ruler, one who would dazzle Rome with charisma and cruelty alike. His name was Caligula. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to keep journeying with us through the rise and fall of ancient empires. Now, prepare yourself, for in this chapter, Rome welcomes a new emperor, one who began as a hero and became a monster. The year was 37 AD. Rome wept at the death of Tiberius, a ruler of fear, secrecy, and suspicion. But then came his successor, Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, known to all by his childhood nickname, Caligula, meaning little boots. He was the son of the beloved General Germanicus, and the people adored him even before he took the throne. When Caligula entered Rome, the city erupted with joy. Crowds lined the streets, shouting his name. He spoke of mercy, freedom, and the return of the Golden Age. The prisons were opened. Exiles were recalled. Gladiatorial games filled the arenas once more. Rome believed at last it had found another Augustus. But the light would not last. Only months into his reign, Caligula fell gravely ill. Some said it was poison, others divine punishment. When he recovered, the man who rose from his bed was no longer the same. The gentle smile had vanished. The eyes that once gleamed with promise now burned with fury. Caligula began to see himself not as a man, but as a god. He demanded worship. Temples and statues were dedicated in his honor. Priests offered sacrifices in his name, and those who refused, they disappeared. Caligula's palace became a stage of divine insanity. He walked dressed as Jupiter, Neptune, and even Venus, claiming he possessed the power of all the gods combined. He built a golden bridge from his palace to the temple of Jupiter, so he could walk between heaven and earth. He made his horse, Incitatus, a symbol of his power, feeding it oats mixed with gold, housing it in marble stables, and even planning to make it senator of Rome. The empire watched in disbelief, but no one dared to laugh. As his madness deepened, so did his cruelty. Caligula began executing senators for imagined insults. He turned trials into public performances. He would summon nobles to dinner, only to have them dragged away to their deaths mid-meal. He demanded absolute obedience. And when a noble once praised him as a god, Caligula replied coldly, "If you truly believe I am a god, then why do you still fear death?" The man was executed the next morning. The laughter of Caligula echoed through marble halls, and Rome trembled beneath its emperor's madness. But perhaps his most absurd act came when he declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea. He marched his legions to the coast of Gaul, lined them up for battle against the waves, and ordered them to attack the ocean. When the surf rolled in, Caligula declared victory and commanded his soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war. He returned to Rome in triumph, displaying the shells as trophies from his conquest of the sea. Even the gods, it seemed, could not escape his insanity. Caligula's extravagance drained the treasury. He spent fortunes on feasts, jewels, and games, then began selling positions in government to the highest bidder. When the money ran out, he turned to execution and confiscation, killing the rich and seizing their property. His palace overflowed with gold. His baths were filled with perfumes. He demanded tributes from every province, declaring that the empire itself existed for his pleasure. Rome had never seen such luxury or such horror. By 41 AD, even his own guards could bear no more. The Praetorian Guard, once sworn to protect him, began to plot his death. One winter afternoon, as Caligula left the theater through a narrow passage, a group of guards struck. They fell upon him with swords, and the mad emperor of Rome was cut down, crying out in shock, "I still live," before he fell to the marble floor. His wife and daughter were killed soon after. His body was buried in secret, for even in death, Rome feared his spirit. When word spread of Caligula's death, Rome breathed again. The senators hoped to restore the republic, but the soldiers had other plans. They searched the palace and found a trembling man hiding behind a curtain, Caligula's uncle Claudius. They raised him up and proclaimed him emperor. And so, even through madness and murder, the empire endured. But Rome had learned a terrible lesson, that power without limits leads not to glory, but to madness. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to stay with us as we continue the epic rise and fall of the greatest empire in history. Now, the story of an emperor who was never meant to rule, but who saved Rome from ruin. When Caligula was struck down in 41 AD, chaos gripped the palace. The Senate debated restoring the Republic, but outside, the Praetorian Guard searched for a new ruler, someone who could keep order and protect their power. Hiding behind a curtain, trembling in fear, they found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, a man in his 50s with a limp, a stammer, and a reputation for foolishness. For years, the imperial family had mocked him. He was the butt of their jokes, the man no one took seriously. But the guard saw something else, a survivor. They dragged him from hiding, saluted him, and shouted, "Hail, Emperor!" The man once thought too weak to rule became the most powerful man in the world. Unlike the emperors before him, Claudius was not a soldier or a politician. He was a scholar. He loved history, law, and learning. He had written books on the Etruscans, Carthage, and the alphabet of Rome itself. When he became emperor, the Senate sneered, but Claudius surprised them all. He worked tirelessly, signing decrees, holding trials, and listening to petitions from every corner of the empire. He said simply, "Let it not be said that the emperor was idle while the empire needed his hand." Rome had found not a conqueror, but a caretaker. Claudius strengthened Rome's government like never before. He expanded the civil service, allowing freedmen and capable citizens to hold important positions, a bold move that angered the Senate but improved efficiency. He repaired aqueducts, built harbors, and improved the grain supply. His grandest achievement was the harbor of Ostia, a colossal engineering project that secured Rome's food from across the Mediterranean. He also granted citizenship to people in the provinces, uniting Rome's distant lands under one identity. While others sought glory in war, Claudius found greatness in good governance. Yet Claudius was not without ambition. In 43 AD, he launched one of Rome's most daring campaigns, the invasion of Britain, a land that even Julius Caesar had failed to conquer completely. Leading the final push himself, Claudius crossed the sea with elephants, legions, and ships. When his forces triumphed, Britain became a new jewel in the Roman crown. The Senate, which had mocked him, now hailed him as conqueror. He returned to Rome in triumph, riding through the streets with banners reading, "Britannia captured." But though Claudius ruled wisely, his personal life was plagued by tragedy and deceit. His wife, Messalina, was known for her beauty and her ambition. While Claudius worked to govern the empire, she conspired behind his back, using her position for wealth and pleasure. When her plots were finally exposed, Claudius ordered her execution, heartbroken yet resolute. But fate was not done testing him. After Messalina's death, Claudius married his niece, Agrippina the Younger, sister Caligula, and mother to a young boy named Lucius Domitius Nero. Ambitious and cunning, Agrippina sought power for her son. She charmed Claudius, manipulated his advisors, and soon Nero was adopted as the emperor's heir, displacing Claudius's own son Britannicus. Behind every curtain, whispers spread. The emperor's new wife is planning his downfall. In 54 AD, the aging Claudius sat down to a feast prepared by Agrippina. Among the delicacies was a dish of mushrooms, his favorite meal. Moments after eating, he began to choke, his lips turning pale, his breath fading. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered, poison. As dawn rose over Rome, Claudius, the scholar emperor, was dead, and by nightfall, Nero had been declared a successor. Agrippina's ambition was complete, but Rome's peace was about to shatter once again. Claudius was not a god, nor a hero of war, but a man of reason, courage, and patience. He proved that wisdom could rule as powerfully as the sword. He expanded Rome's frontiers, strengthened its systems, and gave hope to scholars and thinkers for generations. In a world of madness and ambition, Claudius stood as a reminder that true strength lies not in domination, but in understanding. History may remember him as a stammering fool, but Rome knew him as the emperor who restored its soul. Before we begin, Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to stay with us on this breathtaking journey through the Roman Empire. Now, the tale of an emperor who wanted to be loved like a god, but ended up hated like a monster. It is 54 AD, and the empire mourns the death of Emperor Claudius. But even before the ashes have cooled, the Praetorian Guard proclaim a new emperor, the 17-year-old Nero, son of Agrippina the Younger. At first, Rome rejoices. Nero is young, handsome, and full of promise. He speaks of peace, culture, and the arts. He lowers taxes, frees slaves, and sponsors plays, poetry, and chariot races. The philosopher Seneca, his teacher, guides him wisely. Rome believes has found a new golden age. But in the shadows, Agrippina's ambitions grow dangerous. From her palace chambers, Agrippina rules beside her son. She sits in council meetings, signs decrees, and demands that senators treat her as co-emperor. But Nero, intoxicated by fame and youth, grows restless under her control. He surrounds himself with flatterers, musicians, and dancers. The empire's business begins to fade beneath the glow of his vanity. When Agrippina confronts him, Nero's hatred takes root. In whispers and shadows, he plans what no son should ever plan. To rid himself of her, Nero stages one of the most infamous plots in history. He invites Agrippina to a festival on the coast of Baiae and offers her a magnificent ship rigged to collapse at sea. That night, as the ship sails, the mechanism fails. Agrippina swims to shore, wounded but alive. Furious, Nero orders soldiers to finish the deed. They burst into her chamber, and with her last breath, Agrippina whispers, "Strike here, where the wound bore your emperor." Rome is stunned. A mother murdered by her son. The boy emperor has turned into a tyrant. After Agrippina's death, Nero descends deeper into obsession and indulgence. He builds lavish palaces, stages grand performances, and forces senators to sit for hours as he plays a lyre and recites poetry. He imagines himself a god, an artist destined to reshape the world. Those who question him vanish in the night. Seneca, his once wise mentor, is driven to suicide. Nero's name, once cheered, becomes a whisper of fear. Then, in 64 AD, came the night that would define his legacy. A spark ignited in the Circus Maximus. The flame spread rapidly through the narrow streets. For 9 days, Rome burned. Temples, homes, and markets, all reduced to ashes. As the city burned, rumors spread that Nero watched from his palace, playing his lyre and singing of the fall of Troy. Whether true or not, the people believed it. And belief in Rome was more dangerous than truth. When rage turned toward him, Nero sought a scapegoat and found one in the small, misunderstood sect called Christians. Thousands were arrested, tortured, and executed. The cruelty shocked even Rome. From the ashes of the old city, Nero built a new Rome for himself. At its center stood the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It glittered with marble, fountains, and gold leaf ceilings. Its dining halls revolved to follow the sun, and artificial lakes shimmered at its gates. On its grounds, he raised a colossal statue of himself, the Colossus of Nero. Rome gasped. The emperor had built a city not for the people, but for his ego. The empire's soul was crumbling beneath his vanity. Across the provinces, rebellion brews. The legions in Gaul, Spain, and Africa grow weary of Nero's madness. The Senate, humiliated and powerless, begins to conspire in secret. When the governor Galba declares himself emperor, the Praetorian Guard, once loyal, turns against Nero. One by one, his allies abandon him. The empire he ruled with song and terror now stands ready to erase his name. In 68 AD, Nero flees Rome in disguise, accompanied only by a few loyal servants. He hides in a villa outside the city, as the Senate declares him a public enemy. Hearing the soldiers approach, Nero trembles and whispers, "Is there no one left to make me die like an artist?" With trembling hands, he presses a dagger to his throat, and with the help of a servant, ends his life. His last words echo through history. "What an artist dies in me." The Julio-Claudian dynasty, the bloodline of Augustus, was no more. Rome, for the first time, stood without an emperor. Nero's reign burned away the illusions of divine emperors. He showed that power without restraint leads to ruin, that art without morality becomes madness. Rome would rebuild, but the scars of Nero's fire would never truly fade. The empire that once shone like the sun had now been scorched by its own flame. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment so you never miss a moment of history brought to life. Now, journey with us into one of the most turbulent years Rome ever faced, a year when the empire itself stood on the edge of destruction. The year is 68 AD. The once glorious city of Rome wakes in silence. Its emperor Nero is dead. There is no heir, no plan, no peace. The empire that stretched from Britain to the sands of Egypt suddenly finds itself leaderless. Across the provinces, generals and governors see opportunity in chaos, each believing they should rule the world. Thus begins one of the most dangerous years in Rome's history, the year of the four emperors. The first arrives as Servius Sulpicius Galba, the seasoned governor of Hispania. His soldiers proclaim him emperor, and the Senate, desperate for stability, agrees. Galba marches on Rome. Old, stern, and ruthless, he promises to restore discipline, but instead his greed and cruelty alienate everyone around him. He cuts pay for the legions, executes loyal officers, and refuses to reward the soldiers who brought him to power. Within months, Rome begins to hate the man they once welcomed as savior. In the heart of the city, whispers of rebellion begin anew. Among Galba's allies stands Marcus Otho, a charming and ambitious nobleman who had helped him reach the throne, but expected to be named as heir. When Galba chooses another, Otho's pride turns to rage. He bribes the Praetorian Guard, those sworn to protect the emperor, and on a cold January morning, they strike. Galba's litter is overturned in the streets. The old man, terrified and bleeding, cries out, "What have I done wrong, my children?" But mercy has no place in Rome that day. Galba's head is paraded through the forum, and Otho becomes emperor. Otho tries to rule with fairness. He restores kindness to court, lowers taxes, and wins the people's favor. But far away in Germania, another storm brews. The legions stationed there declared their own emperor, Aulus Vitellius, a gluttonous but popular commander. 2 emperors, 2 armies, and only one empire, as Vitellius's forces march toward Italy. Otho rallies his troops, determined to defend his rule. In the plains near Bedriacum, the 2 Roman armies meet. Brother fights brother. Legion faces legion. The battle is fierce. The screams of men, the clash of steel, the dust of the battlefield, all under the same Roman banners. When the dust settles, Vitellius's forces stand victorious. Otho, realizing he cannot plunge Rome into further bloodshed, takes his own life, whispering, "May the Roman people be spared another death like mine." The empire mourns him, for in his death, Otho showed the nobility that power could not. Vitellius enters Rome as conqueror, but quickly proves unworthy of the crown. He feasts as the empire bleeds. He drains the treasury with endless banquets, feeds his dogs roasted peacocks, and rewards his soldiers with the spoils of corruption, while the Senate trembles under his rule. In the east, a new name begins to rise. Vespasian, the hardened general commanding the Roman legions in Judea. The soldiers, tired of chaos and greed, proclaim Vespasian as emperor. Once again, the empire divides. Rome braces for yet another war. Vespasian is not like the others. Born to a humble family, he is disciplined, practical, and beloved by his men. As Vitellius's supporters feast in the capital, Vespasian's legions march from Egypt, Syria, and the Danube, under the command of his general Antonius Primus. They storm Italy and defeat Vitellius's armies in a blaze of fury. The streets of Rome once again run red with blood. Vitellius, found hiding in the palace, is dragged through the city, his body mutilated by an angry mob. Rome is broken, exhausted, and scarred, but at last the madness ends. In December of 69 AD, Vespasian is declared emperor. He inherits an empire ravaged by greed and war. But he brings something Rome has not felt in years: stability. He rebuilds a treasury, restores discipline to the legions, and begins construction of a monument that will stand for eternity. The Flavian Amphitheater, known today as the Colosseum. Rome, once fractured, finally breathes again. The year of the four emperors was a crucible, a year of blood, betrayal, and rebirth. Out of the ashes of civil war rose a new strength. And from that strength, a dynasty that would define the empire's next great age. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to keep this epic journey alive. Now, witness the rebirth of Rome, from the ruins of rebellion to the creation of a wonder that would stand for eternity. The year is 69 A.D. Rome is weary, scarred by four emperors, endless battles, and broken promises. But from the chaos emerges a man of strength and wisdom, Vespasian. He is no noble prince, no descendant of gods, but a soldier, a man forged in the dust of the battlefield. He has fought in Germany, Britain, and Judea. He knows hunger, hardship, and war. And now, fate calls him to rebuild what others destroyed. When he enters Rome, the people cheer not for his lineage, but for his resolve. The empire, once trembling, begins to hope again. Vespasian's first act is to bring order to chaos. The treasury is empty, the legions restless, and corruption rampant. He reforms the army, cutting off excess and rewarding loyalty. He reorganizes the provinces, restores justice in the courts, and taxes luxury to refill the empire's coffers. Though simple in his habits, he dreams of greatness for Rome, not in the splendor of his palace, but in the strength of the people. And from that vision, a monument is born. In the heart of Rome stood a vast lake, once part of Nero's golden house, where Nero had built for himself. Vespasian would build for the people. He drained the lake and declared, "Here shall rise a monument to Rome, for Romans." Thousands of slaves and craftsmen worked day and night. Marble from Tivoli, stone from the hills, iron clamps to hold it all together. Slowly, arches and columns soared toward the sky. This would be the Flavian Amphitheater, but the people called it the Colosseum, after the colossal statue of Nero that once stood nearby, now remade to honor the sun god. It would seat more than 50,000 souls, a marvel of architecture and engineering, a symbol of Rome's might and unity reborn. When Vespasian dies in 79 A.D., his son Titus takes the throne. Unlike the cruel heirs of dynasties past, Titus is noble, kind, and just. He has proven himself in battle, capturing Jerusalem and bringing peace to the east. Now, he dedicates himself to the people of Rome. In 80 A.D., the Colosseum opens with a festival unlike any other. For 100 days, Rome celebrates. There are gladiator duels, wild beasts from Africa, naval battles reenacted with flooding floors, and banquets for the masses. The Colosseum roars with life. Rome, reborn from war, now rejoices in peace. But even in peace, tragedy strikes. In the same year the Colosseum opens, disaster befalls the empire. Mount Vesuvius erupts, burying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and flame. Thousands perish. Titus sends aid, opens a treasury, and mourns with the people. Then, only a year later, a great fire engulfs Rome once again. Through it all, Titus remains steadfast, earning the love and devotion of his subjects. Yet fate is cruel. In 81 A.D., after just 2 years as emperor, Titus dies suddenly, mourned by an entire empire. Rome weeps. For the first time in generations, they had loved their emperor and lost him too soon. After Titus, his brother Domitian takes the throne. He is intelligent, ambitious, and determined, but also paranoid and ruthless. He strengthens the borders, reforms the army, and continues building projects across the empire. Under him, the Colosseum reaches completion, and the empire's defenses grow stronger than ever. But behind the marble and glory lies fear. Domitian sees enemies everywhere. Among senators, generals, even family, he rules through terror, his spies filling the streets of Rome. The same city that cheered his father's name now whispers in fear. In 96 AD, his own servants turn against him, ending his reign in blood and silence. Thus ends the Flavian dynasty, the family that restored Rome's pride after years of chaos. Vespasian's strength rebuilt the empire. Titus's kindness gave a heart. Domitian's rule, though dark, secured its borders and power. And through it all stood one immortal creation, the Colosseum, a monument to Rome's endurance, its ambition, and its eternal spirit. Centuries would pass. Emperors would rise and fall. The empire itself would crumble to dust. But the Colosseum would remain, its arches whispering of gladiators and emperors, of triumph and tragedy, of a people who believed they could shape eternity. Studio microphone narrator, final, echoing tone. And so ends our story of the Roman Empire, an empire born of ambition, forged in conquest, and remembered forever through stone, legend, and time. Before we close this journey through time, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice keeps history alive, and together we'll continue to bring the ancient world back to life. From the banks of the Tiber River rose a city that would conquer the world, born from myth and legend, nourished by ambition, and driven by an unbreakable will. Rome became the greatest empire the world had ever seen. She built her legacy not only through sword and stone, but through law, art, and the dreams of men who believed in eternity. Through centuries, she rose, guided by kings, then republics, then emperors. Her legions marched across continents. Her road stretched from the Atlantic to the sands of Arabia. And her language, Latin, became the mother of nations. Names like Caesar, Augustus, Trajan, and Marcus Aurelius echoed through marble halls and across the centuries. Rome ruled not just through fear, but through civilization, through the idea that order, discipline, and vision could tame the world. But even empires built of marble can crack. Corruption crept in. Ambition turned to greed. Power consumed those who sought it. From Nero's flames to the chaos of civil war, from betrayal to tyranny, Rome began to turn upon itself. Yet, even in its decline, its spirit refused to die. Centuries later, the empire would fall. The barbarians would march through her gates, and the glory of the Caesars would fade into dust. But Rome never truly died. Her laws live in our justice. Her words breathe in our languages. Her architecture, her ideas, her vision still shape our world today. The Republic inspired democracy. The empire built civilization. And the dream of Rome, the eternal city, remains in every heart that dares to build something that lasts. The Colosseum still stands. The aqueducts still whisper genius. And the ruins of her temples still remind us that no greatness comes without struggle, and no legacy lasts without sacrifice. Rome was more than an empire. It was a testament to what humanity can achieve when courage meets vision and ambition meets destiny. This was a Roman Empire, its rise, its glory, its fall, and its eternal soul.